Hey, I'm David Javorczyk from IGP16E and this would be my game evolution video. So let's start with the paper prototype. As you can see, this was the first version of the whole thing. It had too many ideas basically, so I had to change it up and make it simpler. So I created some small papers with the patterns which the player had to do. The paper prototype was turn-based because I couldn't do the real-time bosses trying to chase you and you have to finish these combos meanwhile. And it was great actually, because I discovered that the player shouldn't have more health. The player could use just like one health while the boss has more. And that the patterns that you're finishing should actually be connected to more gameplay elements. So the games should be built up around these patterns. That's where I actually scrapped the jump mechanic as well, because like the jump was just in place while you should be running around all times, trying to finish your combos and trying to avoid the boss. So the player experience which I was going for was a boss fighting game which first is frustrating, hard, but fair. It's pretty simple, so the player can learn it in a short amount of time. And by time, the player would just go from the afraid defensive to a hard offensive, right? So as the player learns the boss's patterns, it will just get better, and by time it defeats the boss and the whole game ends. That's it. And so the first version of the game was born, which you can see in the background. It's very simple. The boss just chases you, you have to avoid it and finish the combination that you got. The UI wasn't working yet, so most of the things were shown in the output system down there, which had to be changed. The first feedback I got was basically implementing the UI, also showing which button is pressed or should be pressed. And making the boss slower because it was very fast. So after that, I made some changes to the boss which were connected to the pattern. So when you press the wrong buttons, the boss would actually get bigger and faster. Also, there was a slight speed change connected to the time. So if you play more, the boss gets faster and faster and faster exponentially. But it was way more subtle than at the first version. So basically the boss was only getting faster if you didn't finish a combo and you reset. Which happens a lot during the game, because you also get these combos which are like impossible to finish because you would bump into the boss, so you have to reset sometimes. And that was also changed in the later versions where it wasn't as punishing as at first, because it was very punishing at first. Most of the time I was just making the game easier, because there was a bunch of times when I overshot the difficulty and I had to like tone it down a bit. So that was a thing. And then I actually started to work on the look of the game, because I had the main mechanics done, it kind of worked. Started to implement like a tutorial kind of place, like a limbo, where you have to finish 3 combos to trigger the boss to actually start. This only happens once, because like once you start a boss, from that point on there's gonna be a generated save file where it always starts you from the first phase of the boss, where it's actually chasing you from that point. Except that I changed the whole arena to like a dark color, so you feel more confused at start and you would maybe try to get away from the boss, but then you actually get cornered. And yeah, I wanted to emphasize that experience at first. I had to change it a bit, because in later versions the arena was just so dark that you couldn't see anything else except your character, and it was disorientating, so I added like a small subtle light to actually see the corners of the arena. But yeah, that was a thing. I also had to change the shooting speed of the boss, because it was shooting very fast in the second phase. Also an indicator which I added, which shows you if it's going to shoot. Sound-wise, I did some jazzy songs which get faster and faster, eventually leading up to a crescendo at the end, from where you're basically led to the end screen, which is the ending of the game where you can restart. I also wanted to mention a feature which I added later, which was the resetting of the bullets. If you finish a combo, all the bullets on the map are basically getting destroyed, so it's less punishing that way if you get into this hailstorm either at the end or like the middle part where the boss is shooting at you. I did some camera zoom changes, so you see more of the arena when the bullets appear, so it's gonna be easier to navigate that way. I think that's everything. Thank you for your attention.